Hey everyone, this is Brian from Recast Software. In this video, we're going to cover installing Recast Management Server 5.x. So before we get into the installation, let's talk a little bit about the minimum requirements. So for hardware, you'll want at least 4 CPU cores. Bigger orgs will want to start with 8. For memory, you'll want at least 8 gigabytes. SQL Server, you'll want at least 20 gigabytes of free space in addition to your normal Windows installation. More space is required if your team is going to set up lots of trends and snapshots. If you think this will be your team, we recommend starting with 100 gigabytes, and we'll talk a little bit more about trends and snapshots later in the video. For software, you'll want at least Windows Server 2016, the Microsoft .NET Framework, ASP.NET version 6 or later, IIS, the .NET Core Hosting Bundle. The Recast Management Server installation will install this for you if it's not already there. If you install them yourself, the .NET Core Hosting Bundle should be installed after you install IIS. And for SQL, you can use any licensed version of SQL. If you don't have permission to create a SQL database during the installation, you can also pre-create the database beforehand. So this will go into how to do that. We won't go into that during this video, but just know that's another option if you're not able to get a hold of an account that can create a database when you run the installer. So pretty cool. All right, so let's hop over to the install. And today we've got 5.2.2308.103, but the installation instructions should be the same for all 5.x versions. So we'll kick that off. Awesome, you can click next here. The IIS configuration stuff, this will be your server name. So the FQDN of whatever server you're installing a Recast Management Server on. It should default to the correct server. If it doesn't, just make it the FQDN. And the default port is 444, so TCP 444. So like if you plan on deploying recast agents or recast proxies, you'll also want to open up TCP 444 traffic bidirectionally to wherever you're going to deploy agents back to the Recast Management Server. The certificate configuration step, you can either generate a self-signed certificate or you can use an existing certificate. And there's kind of two ways to go about the certificate. The first is to just use a self-signed certificate, which is totally fine. You just need to deploy the certificate to any agent devices if you're going to deploy agents and want them to connect back to the management server before you deploy agents so that trust is there. Or you can create a CA signed certificate where the subject name matches the FQDN of the Recast Management Server. So if the CA is in place, then that'll be trusted by default. So if for example, you try to install a recast agent and that CA cert isn't there, or the self-signed certificate hasn't been deployed to the devices beforehand, this is the error that you'll see. It's not trusted on this device. It needs to be imported in the device's trusted root certificate authority store. So pretty straightforward, but we'll just generate a self-signed certificate for now. And at the SQL configuration, this will be wherever you want the database to be created. So we'll just use the same. And the default SQL port is 1433. So we'll test and just make sure that's all right. It's successful. Here you can put in your portal.recastsoftware.com login. Awesome, that looks good. We can click next. And then this is going to be the proxy configuration. So proxy is used for a number of different things, a couple of them being scheduling like Kiosk Manager and builder actions, which is like the custom workflow stuff, elevating actions. So for example, if you wanted to make it so a service account gets all of your 80 BitLocker keys, you could do that, as well as a bunch of other cool things like loading web dashboards. But for the proxy, there's a kind of tiers of permissions that you would assign based on what you want to do with it. So the minimum permissions, which would be just to access like web dashboards and trends. This is the proxy permissions page. You'd want to give it local admin where it's being installed. So in this case, it's installing along with the Recast Management Server, but you can also install them in other domains on different machines, things like that. Read access to Active Directory, so it can load those objects. A data reader access to your ConfigMgr SQL database. Read-only access to your Configuration Manager console, so that's the read-only analyst security role within Configuration Manager. And if you want to do more with it, like for example, if you want to actually execute actions using the service account, you'll need local admin permissions on the devices that you're actioning against. And you'll also need to give it a bit more permission if you want it to do things like read BitLocker keys from AD or read lapse keys. So, for example, like if you wanted to be able to pull keys from Active Directory, you can just search delegate and go through this process. But yeah, you can do a lot of cool stuff with the service account. Depending on what you do will determine the permissions you want to give it. So I'm going to set mine up to be able to do everything. We'll test the credentials. Looks good. We'll continue. We'll test that we can connect to the domain. So that looks good as well. We'll click next. Mine is pre-filled because I've done an installation before. But SMS provider, what that is just wherever the SMS provider role is installed in your configuration manager environment. Most of the time that's going to be on the primary site server, but it's possible it's a different box. This will be the site code. In my instance, it's CHQ. The SQL server for your configuration manager database. So mine's on the same box. A lot of time you'll see it just like that. So most of the time these will match. And then the SQL database name. The default naming convention for this is CM_site code. So you'll probably have a database that says CM_site code. You can change it. In my case, it's configuration manager _CHQ. So we'll test that. It looks good. We'll click next. This section is if you have a standalone MBAM setup. So if you've got a server dedicated to BitLocker, you would go through these installation steps. I don't have that set up, and it's actually no longer supported by Microsoft. It's end of support, so you'll probably click install to skip past. We'll click yes to continue. You can see it's installing IIS and then the Recast Management Server. If I didn't have the .NET stuff already installed, like the .NET 6 hosting bundle, you'd see that get installed as well, and it'd take a little bit longer, but yeah, it's relatively quick. Awesome. So sped up the video a little bit, but the installation of the Recast Management Server and Proxy are complete. So you can see here, congratulations, super exciting stuff. You can click here to open the page, or it's also going to be copied to your clipboard. So this won't work in Internet Explorer, but it will work in every modern browser, so like Chrome or Edge or Firefox. So we'll just use Edge. And then when you see this first authentication prompt, what you'll want to do is log in with the account that actually completed the install. So I use this account. And when you first launch the Recast Management Server, you'll be greeted with this page. It'll just tell you the information, give you some links about the different features and setting things up. But what we're going to do right away is expand administration. And we're going to go to permissions. And what we can see is there's a users section and a roles section. By default, there's an administrator's role. If you look at permissions, it's got everything checked. So if you assign somebody this role, they can do everything. We're actually going to create a read-only role that gives you all the minimum read permissions, just because a lot of teams are going to extend this out to their help desk and things like that. And it's a good place to start if you want to build out some custom role permissions. So this article is just assign a read-only access role. Here's the path here. But basically, this link will take you to just a simple SQL query. We'll just copy it all. We'll open SQL Management Studio. I'll connect. And then if we expand databases, we'll see the Recast Management Server database. We'll run a new query against it. Paste in the query. Check to make sure that the send identity stuff is at the bottom. And the top looks good. So basically what it's doing is it's creating a role with an ID and a name. The ID is going to be 5,000. You don't have to worry about this. It's kind of in the background, but there will be a new role who has like a hidden ID of 5,000, and it's going to be called read-only access. If you wanted to change the name of this, you could. You could do like help desk or just read-only access. And then all of these permission IDs, so role ID, permission ID, role ID, permission ID, are assigned with one of the permissions that you check when you open permissions and you check or uncheck those options. So it just pre-selects them all for you. So we'll run this, execute, you can see one row created, so that new role was created, and then we assigned all those permissions to it. So if we go back to the Recast Management Server page, which is here, and then see there's only administrators, refresh. Now we've got read-only access, and if we expand it, we've got some things that aren't checked. Basically, you can't make changes, but you can see everything. So, awesome. We've got an administrator's role and a read-only role, and if you want to change it, you can always rename it and then add additional permissions. But what you'll want to do first is add yourself. And since I'm going to be the primary administrator of this lab, and just to note, you can also use wildcards. This is the AD name. So the full name is going to be lab admin, but let's just say I forgot half of it and I wanted to use wildcards to search. Could do that either way, left or right. Found lab admin. If you want to add a group, you can do that as well. So like market, add group. We'll just give marketing read-only access so they can see maybe they're interested in some of the reporting stuff. So we'll save that so they can access it. And then for myself, which is a user and not a role like marketing, I'll give myself administrator. Cool. So I've got a user, myself added, granted administrator role so I can do everything. And then I've got a group added as well. So whoever's in the marketing AD group will be able to have read-only access to the tools if they're accessing the console from a console that's connected to the management server, or if they are looking at like web dashboards directly in the website. So cool. We've got users added. The next couple of things that we'll check for, first will be agent gateway. So what the agent gateway is basically a hub for agents or proxies to connect to. In older versions of Recast, this was kind of a hidden component. So it's out of sight, out of mind. With 5.x, it's visible so you can see it, and you can actually install multiple agent gateways, which is really cool. So if you've got a huge number of agents, you can split up the agent traffic into multiple gateways. And another really cool thing you can do is have an internet-facing agent gateway. So if you wanted to hit internet-connected devices, you could open up the traffic there, which is awesome. So I can see that the agent gateway is connected and authorized. So if I were to deploy agents and point to the management server and agent gateway, they've got a place to go. So next, we'll just make sure that the proxy is connected and authorized. So this is that service account that we installed along with the Recast Management Server. For routes, what this is basically a priority system. So whatever is the highest, and the route type is kind of the important bit here. So if there's a recast agent installed on a device and I run an action against the device, it'll first check to see if there's a recast agent connected and authorized on the device. And if it is, what it'll do is it will use that recast agent application on the device to execute the action using the local system account, which is really cool because you can get around the requirement for a remote registry and remote WMI in a lot of places. If I don't have an agent connected or authorized on the device to run the action against, it'll drop down to the console extension in this configuration. And this is sort of a catch-all because there's always going to be somebody signed into the ConfigMan console when you're running the tools. So it's not going to try and drop down past that. So this will just be whatever user credentials are launching the console and accessing the tools. So what we'll actually do is create a new route for the Recast Proxy. So I'll select Recast Proxy. I've got the one proxy installed in this environment, and I'll give it a role of administrators for now. If you wanted to limit it down, you could. And So as an example, when we were talking a little bit about setting up a proxy to read BitLocker keys from Active Directory, basically how you do that, we'll come back to routes in a second, but we'll first go to service connections. So service connections are basically establishing a connection to a service. So like connecting to Configuration Manager or connecting to Active Directory. There's a couple of different types, but the two ones that you'll use the most are Active Directory and Configuration Manager. So we'll set up both right away. For Active Directory, you'll just put in your domain, and then you'll select the proxy that's going to read from that domain. We'll confirm it, so it's approved. We'll set up one for Configuration Manager. So this will be that same computer or machine where that SMS provider role is. It's normally the primary. And then this is normally CM underscore site code. You can change it. In my case, it's this. And if your service account doesn't have the required permissions, you'll see here in a second when we do the test. So first we'll test our Active Directory connection. And that looks good. Connection succeeded. We'll test the Configuration Manager one now. That also looks good. We're jumping around a little bit, but because we just tested those, I think it's a good segue into Audit Log, and then we'll come back to routes. But Audit Log is basically just logging every event that took place, and you can view the results and what account performed the action. So, for example, like here's the user, this is me. I just did a test action on the Configuration Manager service connection. If we click on proxies, we can see that the service account actually executed the action. And then if we look at the view results, we can get a little bit more information there. Whenever you open view results, it'll open a new tab for you. So you can just close that when you're done looking, which is kind of nice. But just know that it's there. If something ever happens that you didn't expect or you're not getting the results you think you should, you can always kind of dive in here and see how long stuff took, who ran the actions, and what were the results. But since we've got a service connection for Active Directory and Configuration Manager now, we'll go back to routes. And we'll just kind of go through what it would take to set up a route for Recast Proxy to be able to pull Active Directory keys. So we'll select route type. We'll select proxy just like before. Proxy again. I've only got the one, so there's only option listed. We'll give it read-only access so that it's only for pulling these keys and read actions. And then the important bit that relies on service connections, if you want to limit it down to just a single thing, or like a single scope, we'll limit to devices. And then since it's just for Active Directory actions like BitLocker keys and potentially laps, what we'll do is we'll select the service connection for the domain. So it's just Active Directory. If you wanted to limit down to different like OUs groups, you could do that, but we'll give it everything in the domain. So you'll submit, and then you'll raise the priority of this. So if it's a read-only action for Active Directory, it'll use the proxy, retrieve those keys, things like that. If it's not, or you're trying to like make changes, it'll drop down to here unless you've got agents installed. So yeah, that's very basic addition of a Recast proxy that can elevate AD related stuff that's read-only. Pretty cool. Scopes are mostly out of sight, out of mind. So they kind of just work in the background, but the things you want to focus on are that service connections are testing successful. You've got routes to take if you're limiting down the service connections, then, and if they're testing good, then you should be okay there. Logging is another useful feature. So this is real time. You're not really seeing much here at the moment, but if I'm doing different things, like for example, yeah, so real time capturing everything we're doing. If you have users using right-click tools in the console and they're doing lots of stuff, it'll pick things up. You can change the level, so a lot of times it's helpful to just do warning. You can clear, you can restart, you can auto scroll, line breaks, things like that. But a lot of times it can be helpful to capture something, download the logs, and then share it with a support person or look through yourself. But just know that that's there. The Agents tab will show you all the agents that have connected back to your Recast Management Server and agent gateways. I don't have any deployed yet, so you won't see any out the gate. If we go to settings, there's a couple of things here that I want to point out. Some of the more common ones that you'll change is, and the middle column is going to be the name, the leftmost column is going to be plugin, and the rightmost column is going to be the value. But in the middle where you see like display bug fix update prompts to users, this will just be if like there's a release that has different bugs that were fixed. When you launch the console, you'll see an update. This will let you know if the license is expired or about to expire. If you set this to true, you'll see the same sort of thing. And this will be if there's an update available. So you can tweak these a little bit based on what you want your users to see. A lot of times you'll set everything to false if you don't want any of those pop-ups. The max audit log age by default is going to be 0. So again, capturing all those events that take place. 0 is going to save indefinitely. What a lot of people will do, and what I'll do right now is set a date. Most orgs will start with like 30 days, but I'm going to just do 7 in mine since I don't see myself going back farther than that. And I'll do 7 for the max audit log age and the max snapshot age. Awesome. So that looks good. If your org has disabled ping, what you can do is disable ping before running tools. So this action right here, by default, when we run actions with right-click tools, it'll ping first because it's fast to see if it's reachable. But if you disable ping, it's going to fail, and it's going to say the computer's not on, even though that's not necessarily true. So if you have disabled ping, make sure to set this value to false. If you plan on deploying agents to outside of a trusted domain, you might want to change this so that they're automatically approved to like all. Default is just going to be trusted domain. Same goes for agent gateway and proxy. If you got ServiceNow, you can add the ServiceNow instance URL here. But yeah, for settings, that's the basics. So the last piece that we can kind of go over is the trends and dashboards. So because I just made these changes, let me actually re-authenticate. So we can get those new permissions now that I've signed an administrator's role to my lab admin account. Cool. So now you see a little bit more and you expand dashboards. And if you've used the right-click tools dashboards in the console, these names will look really familiar to you. This is just kind of the web version. So for example, Active Directory Cleanup, the way that this dashboard is used is you compare an OU to a collection normally that will have the same objects inside, and you kind of find outliers. So what I'll do is just compare all of Active Directory and all of Configuration Manager. I'll run a scan and it will tell us the breakdown. So this is a really small environment and it's super clean. Both is ideally what you're looking for, but if for some reason there's devices that are only in Active Directory or only in Configuration Manager, you can get a list of those devices and you can get helpful information like last login, for example. But what a trend is, which we kind of hinted at a little bit earlier in the video, but what a trend is basically this on a schedule. So this is a snapshot. If I create a snapshot and say snapshot of AD cleanup 8-7, I can share this URL with somebody. I can say, hey, look, Active Directory cleanup results from today. They can load it. If they've got permissions, they'll be able to see the results returned, which is really cool. But to kind of one-up that, what you can do is set that on a schedule with the trend. So if I wanted to see how things look week over week over a period of time, because maybe my team has an initiative to clean those things up. It's a project. I could set every Sunday at 1 a.m., repeat every week, and submit. And then what you'll see when you go to the trends tab here is you'll start to see these graphs fill out with points in time that you can drill into. So really powerful and awesome stuff, especially like the software update compliance. It's all really good, but especially the software update compliance security teams really love, because you can objectively say that you're doing better and show your management team that things are improving, or you can basically get flagged if things aren't. So really awesome. So if you've got endpoint insights, there's a couple of warranty events that will run, and you can see like the last run start and last run complete, which can be helpful, but they'll run automatically for you each night. If you don't have endpoint insights, you don't have to worry about it. But it is an awesome reporting tool, and you should definitely look into it, especially if your team does computer refresh. The warranty information is awesome, or if your team is having a hard time tracking down like docking station information, monitors, things like that. Stuff that's really hard to get natively with Configuration Manager. It's definitely worth checking out. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out. Take care.